And joining us now is David Caplan. He's the Liberal member of the Ontario Legislature for the riding of Don Valley East, and we're happy to welcome you here to TVO again.
Steve, glad to be here.
Okay, we've got you in that chair today because of water.
Good.
You've got a private member's bill before the legislature on the idea of people actually paying for the water they use. The full cost of water.
Yes.
I guess probably people are under the assumption that they already pay the full cost of water. Is that not the case?
That's definitely not the case. Many places where they do say we get full cost, they're only talking about the operational cost, how to purify it, how to get it to and pump it to, take it away, purify it, put it back in the environment. There's the infrastructure cost, there's the financing cost, there's a cost for all of the regulatory ability. We're paying for it one way or the other. It's just a question of making sure that we align people's behaviors with and using the proper practices for water. So, for example, we don't have full water metering in our province. It's really important, I think, that if you're going to make people accountable for what they use, that you should know what they do. In my neighborhood, for example, one of my neighbors very famously washes his driveway about every week. I don't see why, as a water user, I should have to pay for somebody else to have that kind of a practice. I think I should pay for what I use.
But if he's using more, isn't he already paying more?
Well, in fact, no, because we're not paying the full cost. It's subsidized by all of us, through the tax base, and that's simply wrong. We should account for what it costs to produce this glass of water. We should then figure out how to make sure that it's as low and affordable for ratepayers. That's why I've proposed the bill. But a number of other things are contained in the bill. For example, mandating public ownership. I think that it is important that we own our water. It's such a critical resource.
I'm going to come back to
that.
We're
going to come to that? But there's other parts of the bill I want to get to it, David.
I'm going to get to it. But I still, on this issue, it's not a shot. You're in politics, you know. People always want something for nothing. So if they've been getting something that they haven't, as you've described it, paid the full freight for over the years, right, why would they want to start? Well,
our parents and grandparents did. When they put the pipes into the ground, now a lot of those pipes are, on average 50 years old for about half of the province, in some cases over 100 years old. And they have to be replaced. Things have a useful life to them. So we have had previous generations do this. It's important that we do this for public health, for economic development, for proper environmental practices, for energy costs. You know what the single largest cost for municipalities for energy is? Pumping water through their system. Well, we're seeing about an average of 25% of it leaked out of the pipes. So we're paying
because the pipes are old.
Because they're old.
Falling apart.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're paying to purify it. We're paying to do all this, but it's not reaching the destination. We're paying the energy cost to be able to pump it through the system. And there's a lot of other reasons, as I say. So I think it's important that if we want to sustain our water, if we want to sustain our quality of life, that we have the means to be able to do so.
You're going to tell me, because I can't remember, if in 2005, the report of the Water Strategy Expert Panel.
Yes.
Was that something you commissioned? Were you the minister?
So I was the Minister of Infrastructure at the time, and I asked three gentlemen, one a fellow by the name of Harry Swain. Harry was a former deputy minister federally, but he worked with Justice O'Connor on the Walkerton water inquiry. Another was Fred Lazar, who was an economist from York University, and the third was a fellow by the name of Jim Pine. Jim was municipal CAO, I believe, in Hastings County.
Well, can I share the numbers here?
Oh, sure, please do.
Because some of these numbers are staggering. They looked into it, as you asked them to do, and here's what they came back with. Michael, if we can, this graphic. Water and wastewater assets in the province of Ontario, we have $72 billion of infrastructure out there. For water treatment, $20 billion. For distribution and collection, $52 billion. And they estimated, the Swain Group estimated, that water and wastewater investment required between back then, 2005, and the year 2020 would include $25 billion more for capital renewal, $11 billion more for deferred maintenance, and $9 billion more for growth. And the report went on to say that without a sharp increase in capital investment, the gap between what's needed and what we're on track to spend would be $18 billion.
And growing.
And growing. We're talking real money here, obviously. Mm-hmm. Now, is this just pipes and water mains we're talking, or at this that I've referred to here?
A lot of it is. Some of it is our systems themselves, which, we've built the system to purify and to pump it out and all of that kind of stuff. A lot of it is aged. Like replacing your roof. You have to every 25 years. Our water infrastructure, unfortunately, we haven't. And
Why not? Why haven't we?
I think it's out of sight, out of mind. I think it's under the ground. So it's a lot easier, particularly for municipalities when people are worried about crime and safety and funding police services or transit services or recreation services or having a lot of those other things. Water is a bit of an afterthought, and I think we assume that it's just going to be there for us when we go and turn on the tap. We learned about 10 years ago, to our horror, that when we don't have the proper practices, people can get sick and die. And there were a lot of factors and a lot of reasons why that happened. That's why I see this work, this legislation that I proposed, as the next steps in solving some of the legacies from the Walkerton water tragedy.
But the bottom line here is that this $18 billion gap between what we're spending and what we need to spend doesn't get closed until people pay the full freight. Is that the key bottom line here?
Well, unless somehow there's going to be a lot of money arrive from somewhere. But even when you've seen like recent stimulus programs from federal and provincial governments in order to fight the recession and invest in infrastructure, that's not even nearly enough to meet what we're going to need. And I think water should be on sustainable footing. What I would like to do is what Adam Beck did for electricity in this province to make sure that we have it today and for generations to come. I think we should do the same with water.
We don't generally pay for infrastructure with a specific user fee. I know the 407 highway is up there, but all the other 400 series highways in this province, you can ride them as long as you like, as much as you like, and you don't pay anything more beyond what you pay in your taxes. Why do you think we need to do that with water when it isn't that way for other things?
Well, we do for electricity and we do for transit. So we do, and I think water should be a true utility, like our energy system, which is why I call for things like economic regulation and oversight that takes place. And I hope we will get into why an Ontario Water Board is absolutely necessary.
I'm only at question 5 of 16, 17, David. Give me a chance here. Okay. But tell me, here's the obvious question. You were the minister.
Yes.
Did none of this improve when you were the minister?
Well, there were a lot of things that were and did improve, and we did make a lot of investments. We created, programs for small towns and municipalities to invest in water. But that was the reason for commissioning the work from Harry and his group, was to what are the next steps that we need to take. And by the way, anytime you make changes, it doesn't come without at least some consequences. Not everybody supports the changes that I'm proposing. It's quite threatening to some of the municipalities because they're used to the way things are delivered now. What I'm suggesting is far greater oversight, far greater accountability, far greater transparency in our water system than we have today.
But has nothing improved in the 5 years since Swain came out with those recommendations?
Nothing from a system standpoint really has. There have been investments, true, through programs like COMRIF, MRIF, other things, partnerships with the federal government and municipal governments as well. But from a structural standpoint, to put it on a sustainable footing, no, that hasn't taken place.
Okay, let's do bottom line here. If your plan were to be adopted as the law of Ontario, let's do the thing. Your typical family of 4 in Don Valley East, who are paying, I don't know, what, $50 a month for their water usage right now?
It really
what would
varies.
They pay under your plan?
Well, it really varies quite a bit across the province. You have small towns that have water systems where you have people who are paying $700, $800, where here in the city, yeah. But here in the city, here in the city, where you have a much bigger base of people to support a system, you get what's called cross-subsidization of users. So it's like a cooperative, or that's kind of the model that I think about it, is so if Steve Paikin and David Caplan and 100,000 of our other neighbors are part of the system, it keeps the cost down for all of us. So the work that Harry and his group did when they ran the economic modeling, they said when it was fully implemented, and you would have to do it over a period of time, the increase would be around $40 or so, but it would vary across the province. The thing that you have to remember, though, is, as he said earlier, with those enormous costs of infrastructure, $24 billion, $9 billion, $11 billion, you got to pay those anyways, and you're going to pay more the longer that you wait and defer making those investments, because you'll have bursts. I believe here in the city of Toronto, on an average year, you get 4 per day, 1,500 water main breaks per year. Well, think about the added cost, not just of fixing the water, but roads that get washed away, basements that get flooded.
We got to talk money.
Well, but it's money out of somebody's pocket, and that comes out of the pocket.
You want it to be out of the user's pocket.
But the users will pay for it anyways. You'll pay for it in your taxes. You'll pay for it in your insurance premiums. You'll pay for it in other ways. I'm saying that if you take this approach overall, you'll pay less than you would have otherwise.
Is it still going to be twice as much as we're paying right now?
It'll be twice as much. I'm not sure that that's really the case. I think you're going to be paying. You're going to see it's going to differ from place to place, and it is hard, as I say, because one of the things that I call for is looking at some of the municipalities and some of the neighborhoods working together and being part of larger corporate units, so larger utilities.
Well, let me pick up on
if
that.
they do that, that will keep the cost down for everyone. Where they don't, that'll mean it'll be more expensive.
Okay, there are some businesses, obviously, you think of farms, you think of breweries, steel mills, that use a lot of water.
Absolutely.
And they're not, I can only imagine in the middle of, or not in the middle of, we're coming out of it, but you know, in these economic times, suddenly their water bills are going to go through the roof if this were to take place. I mean, have you talked to them about it and whether or not they're able to weather this kind of a storm?
I have not, but I do believe it would be affordable. And I think there's the basic question: why should residents who now pay for those particular users, why should they subsidize profitable industries who are using water for their processes or in their sales? I think that it is a public good, that it should be there not only today but in future generations as well. And I think that the other measures that I've suggested would make it affordable and keep the cost down for everyone.
Okay, besides raising the money to pay for all of the things that we've already talked about, what do you want to accomplish by putting a water meter on everybody's house?
I think it's an interesting story that my colleague Jean-Marc Lalonde, he's a colleague from Eastern Ontario, said when he was a municipal politician many years ago, he wasn't in favor of water metering. Eventually they brought it to his town, and he said water usage immediately got cut in half. What we're seeing in the practices where we have vast overconsumption. People are not using a resource wisely, and I think it's one of the adages: if you don't measure it, you can't improve it, and you can't have the proper accountability. So I think that as a basic conservation measure, but I think also as a basic measure so that the water users, the residents and the businesses are being as responsible as they can. They should pay the full cost, and they should pay for what they use.
I can imagine people saying, though, we live in a province, thankfully, which has thousands upon thousands of lakes. We have one of the 5 Great Lakes 20-minute drive south of us right now. There's lots of water everywhere.
That's precisely it. It's out of sight, out of mind, and we take it for granted. Canada sits on, and most of it would be in polar ice caps, of course, 20% of the world's freshwater supply. And think about that. There are places in the world that are literally going thirsty, that we're having droughts, that you're seeing not having the access. We're very blessed to have it, but I think it's meant over the years that we've taken it for granted. And
if you have meters in place, do you assume that if you use it at off-peak hours, you get a break, and if you want to use it a lot during peak hours, you're going to charge more, that kind of thing? I didn't propose that. I think that would be difficult. I mean, there is smart metering technology. I don't know if that would change behavior. I think metering itself would change behavior simply to have the accountability of what you pay for, paying for what you use. So I wouldn't advocate for that, although I would be open to hearing if people thought it was a good idea or not. Did you hear the criticism from the Council of Canadians on this?
You know what? It perplexed me quite a bit.
I'm going to share, because you know it, but maybe our viewers don't. So I'm going to read a little excerpt from what they wrote. Metering, which we're talking about here, they say, is a false conservation strategy, making municipalities dependent on income from water use and reducing incentives for true conservation strategies, such as infrastructure upgrades. Requiring municipalities to cover their own costs for water and wastewater services by forcing Ontarians to pay higher fees also means green infrastructure upgrades will fall by the wayside, unless households in Ontario are willing and able to pay for it out of their own pockets. Okay, what do you say to that argument?
Well, infrastructure upgrades are falling by the wayside now, which is the current system that we have, as evidenced by the infrastructure deficit in water, which is absolutely enormous. What I'm saying is that's a problem. We need to do something about this for our public health. We need to do something about this for our economic development. We need to do something about this for future generations. And I don't see how it's a false conservation strategy. It's a real conservation strategy that people use what's in front of them, and when they're aware of it, they'll take the steps. When they're not, again, it's that out of sight, out of mind kind of attitude. I think they've really misunderstood what the intent behind the legislation is, in fact, is to invest in water systems. By creating the situation where you have full cost accounting and full cost recovery, what I've mandated is that these municipal utilities, publicly owned, will develop business plans for where they're going to invest those dollars to make sure that, and here's a real problem that we have right now with the current system. We collect money from water users, and then we put it in these reserve accounts. And every 4 years, whenever we have a municipal election, guess what? They find additional money in reserves to be able to keep the cost of social services and the other attendant costs down so that the municipal taxes don't go up. And what happens? Well, when it comes time to make the investments, the money in the reserves is no longer there. I'm saying that practice has to end. Okay. That's why we need to reserve and have segregated accounts and oversight to make sure that money collected is in fact invested in the green infrastructure. So I think the council really has missed the boat on this one.
Okay, let's try this one on authority and oversight, because I know one of the things you want to see is a new Ontario Water Agency. Right. What would it do?
So it would regulate. I mean, you would have the utilities, which would say, this is what we think we need to be able to charge water users. And they would take that rate increase or that rate case to this board, who would say, listen, these are the things that you said you're going to invest in. This is reasonable. These are the kind of rates that you think you need to be able to recover it. We think that that's reasonable and affordable or not. And we need to go back to the drawing board if not, but if it is, then it would be approved. So that would be one thing. So to approve,
like an energy board type of thing?
Like an energy board, but I see it being less heavy-handed, a lot more of a light-handed regulator. I want to see a lot of it driven from the local utility, very much so, as I think water users and ratepayers would expect. There's other roles for the water board. They would be a lot of the public transparency. So all of those plans that utilities would come up with, they would post them on websites. They would allow for public comment. They would do other things as well. Remember I talked about segregating funds and making sure that they weren't taken and used to keep the tax rates down. They would make sure that that did not happen, that where they said they were going to spend the money, in fact, it's spent. I'll give you a great example. In the City of London, they have two corporations. One is the Corporation of the City of London. The other is the Public Utilities Commission. They're on the same floor, I believe the second floor of their City Hall. The planning department is in one side, the PUC is on the other. The City of London, in their accounting, charges their planning department about $15 a square foot for rent for the space that they're occupying. They charge the Water Utilities Corporation over $70 a square foot. So there's a lot of ways that municipalities kind of take money out of the water system, like that, and other kinds of ways that don't benefit the water users. It goes to subsidize other places in the municipal budget, and that's wrong. So the water board would make sure that the proper practices are in place and look at it from the public's interest, because if you're going to have bigger units, they're going to have monopoly power. You want to have somebody there to make sure that the public interest is maintained.
Okay, let's do one last thing here, and that is on the throne speech. Water was a big deal in the throne speech this year, and I guess the Premier setting out a goal of making this province a water technology and conservation leader in the world, build on our strong foundation of water expertise, as he said, make it our clean water capital of North America. Is what you're proposing consonant with any of that?
I'm not working in concert with the government, although I am a member of the government caucus, and I hope the government will pick up some of the ideas that I've put forward. You know, when I put forward previous private members' bills related to building affordable housing or tenant rights, the Harris government picked up those ideas and embedded it in their own legislation or through regulation. I think what the throne speech outlines, though, is very much in tune with where my thinking is and with the kind of practices that we're going to need in order to achieve that lofty goal. I think it's a great goal. And I really give Premier McGuinty a lot of credit for taking on something which, for a lot of people, as I say, it's underground, it's out of sight, it's out of mind, but I believe it's a real opportunity. We can develop an industry here. We can develop the foundation for economic success. We can have a place which I think will rival anywhere in the world, and we have the real seeds of a solution already in place. Ontario has a lot going for it, and I think it's a tremendous vision that he has, and I'm eager to see the work commence.
Enough compliments for the boss. Where's your bill at right now?
Well, I introduced it back in December. I did have second reading debate and did get the support of my colleagues. It did die on the order paper when the House was prorogued, so I have reintroduced it. So it's back at the first reading introduction stage. And I hope that as the government moves forward, that the ideas are incorporated and that we'll see change in this area.
Okay. David Caplan, thanks for visiting us at
Steve,
TVO tonight.
Thank you so much. That was great.